Welcome to Passion and Profit. If you're a small business owner or solo entrepreneur, this episode is for you. It would not only help you achieve your business goals, but it will also help you enjoy the process. Let's get started.
You have a profit and loss statement, which most of us know tells us if we made a profit or if we lost money. And we're typically going to look at a P&L monthly or annually. We might look at a P&L year to date as well, but it's always a snapshot and it's always going to show us what already happened in our business. So on a profit and loss statement, we have 5 different categories. And what's interesting is if you're an inventory-based business, of those 5 categories, 4 of them are directly tied to inventory.
Passion and Profit with your host, Delmith Morales, the podcast for makers and manufacturers. Welcome to another Passion and Profit episode. I'm your host, Delmith. This podcast is created by Inventora, the all-in-one inventory system for makers and manufacturers. Today, we're going to be talking about understanding how inventory actually works. I have another episode with Ciaras Stockland, so I'm so excited to have her here with us. We previously discussed all the ins and outs of a inventory-based business, and honestly, it was such a good episode. I encourage everyone to go listen to it. It's really useful for us, the makers and small business owners, solo entrepreneurs. I think it's going to help us in all of the things that we really need to take into consideration to make our business successful. So, Ciara, welcome. I'll just leave you the time to introduce yourself, tell us about your background, and then we can start with our topics for today.
That sounds good. Well, I'm excited to be here again and talk about inventory and financials and all of the things that we often avoid in an inventory-based business or we're very confused by or overwhelmed by. So hopefully I can break some things down for people today and just make inventory a little less daunting. So my background is in retail. I started my first retail concept in 2006. It was a brick and mortar boutique store. And then I changed directions a bit, merged 2 different concepts that I had together and created a designer outlet store. So I worked a lot with manufacturers and wholesalers and designers, most of them out of the West Coast. I did have some East Coast clients as well, but we would buy their overstocks, their liquidations, and we would sell them in our stores. So we built that brand, or I built that brand and franchised it and ran that for about a decade. During that time, not only did we have brick and mortar, but we had a whole wholesale division and a liquidation division too. So I would help a lot of brands, not just apparel, sell and liquidate overstocks. So became very familiar with the ins and outs of inventory. I've touched many, many pieces of inventory. I ended up selling that brand to one of my franchisees, and my next venture was a subscription box for wholesalers and retailers. And so again, had access to a lot of inventory and sold it in a subscription model. So I built that and grew it, sold that in about 18 months. And now I am a consultant for inventory-based business owners. My main program is called the Inventory Genius, the same name as my book, Inventory Genius. And I love helping inventory-based business owners create more profit and keep more cash. So that's what I do. I love it.
Oh, I love that. It's so it's not normal to hear someone saying, I love to talk about inventory, right? And I just love your passion, and the things that you're doing, honestly, are such a great help for small business owners that are trying to avoid inventory.
Yeah.
In all the time, right?
Yes.
So I think the topic for today is such a good one because we are going to understand how inventory actually works. Can you walk us through that?
Yes. Yeah. And, I think, like you mentioned, I'm passionate about it because I want to encourage everyone that's listening. If you have inventory, you have a very special business. You have a secret weapon that service-based business owners don't have. So often when you go and you look for a bookkeeper or an accountant, most of them will not touch a business if it has inventory. They say, I don't want to mess with inventory. I don't do anything with inventory, because it can be very complicated and overwhelming. Even from a bookkeeping and accounting side, it doesn't have to be, but it can be if you don't understand the ins and outs and how it actually works. And so I'm passionate about it because when I can see an inventory-based business take the information I give them and apply it and see that light, go on where they're like, oh my goodness, now I know what's happening. Now I know the control I have over my business finances because I understand how inventory actually works. This is what gets me so excited. So how does it actually work? Let's just talk about that. So I want to just kind of briefly go over financials because that's where we're going to start. So you have a profit and loss statement, which most of us know tells us if we made a profit or if we lost money. And we're typically going to look at a P&L monthly or annually. We might look at a P&L year to date as well, but it's always a snapshot and it's always going to show us what already happened in our business. So on a profit and loss statement, we have 5 different categories. And what's interesting is if you're an inventory-based business, of those 5 categories, 4 of them are directly tied to inventory. So you have to sit up and listen. You have to learn what your financials are saying and how to read them. If you have an inventory-based business, that's huge. 4 of those 5 categories are directly tied to our inventory. So the first is going to be our sales, of course, the sale of inventory, right? Our next line on the profit and loss is our cost of goods sold, and that's the cost that it took to make those sales. If I sold 10 pairs of jeans and I sold them each for $20 and they each cost me $10, my cost of goods sold was the cost of those jeans that actually sold, not the invoice of the 40 that I purchased. It's just the cost of the 10 that sold. And then the difference between our sales and our cost of goods sold is our gross margin. And this is your gold mine if you know how to use it, right? Our margin is what we get to work with to create a paycheck and to keep more profit to pay off our debt. Then underneath it is going to be our expenses. That's the one part of the P&L that doesn't have anything to do with inventory. That's going to be just operating expenses, like what it costs to run your business. And then the difference between all of it is your profit. So sales minus your cost of goods sold is your margin, minus your expenses is your profit. And we want our profit to grow. We want that to be a nice big black number at the bottom. And then on the balance sheet, we're going to have our assets and our liabilities, which we talked about in the other episode. Assets is going to be cash and anything we can turn into cash, including our inventory. So what's the value of our raw materials or our finished goods? And then what do we owe? The liabilities is what we owe to others. So we have to understand where the inventory lands and where it sits and where its home is on our financials in order to understand why or why not we are seeing money or we're not seeing money. So when people have a business and they do lots of sales and they have lots of volume, they'll say, oh my goodness, Ciara, like I had a great big weekend or I had my highest growthing month ever, but I have no money. Where's all the money going? It's directly tied to the inventory. If our gross margin isn't heavy enough to support the cost of running our business, we might not have a lot of cash left. Or if we have a lot of debt and our margin isn't heavy enough to support the cost of running our business and our debt load, we might also not have a lot of cash. So if you're finding yourself cash poor, even though you have a lot of sales, chances are your inventory is playing a role in that.
Wow. I think that is, I think that's a lot. But honestly, it's so right. I mean, you're right. Like, if you don't have your goals clear, and if you're seeing, I know probably this happens more often than we think. Like, I'm having a lot of sales, but where's my money? We don't have idea of where is our money going. So how can we start detecting those key points that you're mentioning? Like, okay, I have a debt, and that's why my profit margin is not enough. How can I start telling that it's not working?
Yeah. So in the framework that I use with my clients, we always start with their sales goal. So we'll start with the sales goal because a lot of business owners don't set sales goals, but they know how to pick a number. If you ask them, like, what do you want to make? Oh, I want to be a 7-figure business or whatever. So setting the sales goals is the fun part. So we always start there. Tell me what your sales goal is. Okay. So we set a sales goal. Now tell me what your current margin is running. And this is something I wanted to bring up with you. When I ask this question, tell me what your margin is, I often hear, well, I mark everything up 3 times. Okay, but that's not your margin. That's your markup. Your margin is what happens when it sells. Because you can mark something up 3, 4, 6, 7, 10 times. But if you clearance it out and you sell it, for a 40% margin, that's your true margin. That's what's left. So we look at their sales goal, then we dig into like, what is your margin today? Then we look at like, what does it cost to run your business? We put this all down into the framework worksheet that I have. And then at the end of the day, okay, what is your net profit? Now, if that profit is if it shows that it's negative, we have a problem. So we have levers we can pull. We can increase our sales goal, we can increase our margin, we can decrease our expenses, or we can do all three. Okay, then we go back to the bottom again. So this is a work in progress, right? Then we look and we say, okay, well, now I'm profitable. I just worked on this with a brand new client. We went back and forth and we got her to a place, okay, she was going to show, if she stayed on budget, made her sales goal, all of the things, she'd show a profit of about $2,500 a month. And I said, okay, well, that's a great start, but your debt payment, your loan payment is $5,000 a month. So it's not enough, because even if you make your sales goal and even if we get the margin and even if you leave lean and mean in your budget, you're only going to have, best case scenario, $2,500 to work with. And you have a loan payment of $5,000. So we need to go back to the drawing board again, and we need to look at margin, and we need to look at sales goal. So it's very much like a push and pull, right? So we look at one part of our business, we mess with it, we move things around, and we keep going back to the drawing board until we have a plan that can create profit.
That makes sense. And I think it's very useful to understand, go back and say, okay, what am I doing? What am I doing wrong? Or what can I improve? And I know it's going to take time. It's not going to be something that you're going to change in the first day that you're making the change. What's like an average of when we're going to start seeing improvement in that area?
It really depends. I want to say it really depends on the mindset of the entrepreneur. So a lot of people are interested in change, but they're not committed to it. This is hard work. It's hard work to say, I'm going to cancel that order because while I place that order, it doesn't make sense now that I know my finances. I can't afford it. It's not a good line, or it's not a good supplier. It takes a lot of work to say, I'm going to get lean and mean with my budget. I can no longer have 10 people on my payroll. I can only afford 6, and I need to go back in and work a little bit more. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of work to say, I'm going to go through and I'm going to mark up all my products by a little bit, even if it's $1, right? Because that's uncomfortable. And so it really is up to the mindset of the entrepreneur. When I work with clients who are like, I'm not just interested in change, I am committed to paying off my debt, to running my business like it's a business, to stop playing store with my store. Those entrepreneurs, they can turn things around pretty quickly. If you have a lot of debt, sometimes that'll take time, more time, because we have to look at how can we consolidate it? How can we get smart? How do we get into debt in the first place? How do we stop those mistakes and stop the bleed, right? But it can be done. It takes a lot of effort and concentration and being willing to be uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think that's key. And for us, the makers and small business owners, we started our businesses picturing it like it's going to be perfect. Everything is going to work. Everyone is going to love my products. And that's why we get excited, and probably we invest all of our money without thinking about the negative side of it, right? And I think to have like the best mindset in saying, okay, this is not working. I have 10 employees right now. I need to reduce them. I think that's hard. Honestly, those transitions and changes in our business are hard. But like you said, if you put the effort and you have the right mindset to do that, I think that's the key for success.
Yeah. And I, in my own story, I remember I had started my first retail. It was a high-end baby and maternity boutique. So beautiful boutique, really high-end product. And then I opened a designer outlet store. So I had 2 different concepts next door to each other. Really interesting A/B tests. I didn't think about going, doing that purposefully, but I had the opportunity to have 2 different types of boutiques at the same time. The outlet store appealed to the masses. Everyone loved a deal. Like I would have lines at the door every Saturday. I had amazing margins. I made a lot of money. The high-end baby boutique was beautiful. It was my dream. People said, "Oh, your store's so gorgeous, Ciara." The outlet store was ugly. Like we sold product quickly. We weren't there to make something beautiful. We were there to give you a deal, right? And so I had this conflict, like, what do I do? Because I didn't want to. So which am I going to go with? And I remember talking to my banker, and he said, well, do you want to have something that you like, that you love, that you think is beautiful, or do you want to make money? And I was like, well, I want to make money. And he said, then I think you know your answer. And so we ended up combining them, right? So a lot of times in business, we think it's an either or, but what if it's an and but? And so I said, well, why couldn't I have the outlet concept in a boutique environment? And so that's how I came up with the concept when I merged them. But when I see entrepreneurs that say, but my dream was this, or I love this product, I can't get rid of that line. They're making decisions based off of emotion, and that's not going to create profitability. So if people aren't buying that product, if people aren't buying that size range anymore, or, you know, that brand or whatever it is, sell them what they want. If you want to make money, like if you just want a hobby and you want to keep losing money, you can do whatever you want. But if you truly want to make money and make a change, we have to do the things that aren't always the way we envisioned it in the first place.
Yes. And I think that's the beauty of being a business owner. Everything is going to start like you picture it, but then the time goes and people are looking for something different. And if you don't evolve, it's okay. Like you said, it's okay if you want to live your dream and lose money. But if you really want to make money and be profitable, you need to start evolving as well. If not, you're going to be just another...
You'll be left behind.
Yeah, and that's not good. So now let's talk about fixed inventory cost versus fluctuating COGS. What's that?
Yes. So just really being aware of the fixed costs of inventory versus, fluctuating cost of goods sold. So I think we get in this mentality of this is the price point. This is what they said this bolt of fabric will cost, or this is what this vendor always charges me for these shoes, or whatever. This is what's on the line sheet, so that's what I have to pay. But there's fluctuation in there if you can get really good about looking at your numbers and coming to your vendors, your suppliers, and people you have relationships with, and come to them with data. So I always tell my clients, there's always overstock. There's always closeouts. There's always liquidation. You might go to a sales rep and they'll say, no, we don't have any. They all do. Everybody does. So just like a retail store always has closeouts, they always have clearance product. So does a wholesaler. So does a designer. They always have canceled orders. So going to them and saying, okay, I know that the line sheet says $5, but if I take 100 of them, can I have them for $3? Or what is the shipping threshold when I can get free shipping? So that we have some fluctuation in there, which is going to build extra margin. So instead of just looking at this is the fixed cost of the inventory, it is what it is, I have to pay what's on the sheet, get really savvy and advocate for yourself as a business owner. And again, this is uncomfortable. People don't want to do these hard things. I don't want to ask. That seems so awkward. What if they say no? What if they say yes? What if you can gain 5 more margin points by just negotiating a better rate on shipping, or by, taking more inventory each shipment? So go to bat for yourself and really look at the fluctuation and then how that plays into your margin.
I think that's hard for us, that we are learning to do all of those things with our business, and it's kind of nerve-wracking, right? It's like, okay, let's try. And I like to have that positive thought in my mind, like saying, okay, what if they say yes? Like, that's something that really helps to go with it and ask, right? But I mean, for when you're starting, you are like opening your business right now, for example, and how can you start negotiating if you just want to have like a small batches of something? Like, what's the best thing to do there?
Yeah, so there I would probably really, if you can't take mass amounts of inventory, or that's not your negotiating power, maybe it is just really evaluating your options. So price shopping. Don't just buy this brand because everybody has it or you thought it would work well. Is there something that's comparable? And I would still ask, I would still ask, what do you have on the closeout list? And, a lot of retail or wholesalers will have a list and they don't have huge minimums on their closeouts. And even if you can feed some of that in, I have a couple clients who love to buy, they're both boutique retailers, and they love to buy from one of their brands. They do mystery boxes. So they'll send, you get 100 items, you don't know what you're going to get, but it's only $5 a piece. And a lot of these things will retail for $100. And so, yes, you get some weird things in there, but the vast majority of it, they can buy it for $5. They can market the $80 or the $70 and make massive margin that can offset some of their other brands where they can't really get that margin. So it's just getting really creative. Don't just think, I have to go to market. I have to buy the way everyone else does. I have to shop the catalog. I have to accept the pricing. You can always ask. And as a small business owner, you should be getting a lot of no's, because that means you're going to get some yeses. If you're never getting no's, you're not asking the questions. So ask, see what you can get, advocate for yourself, and then really watch the margin, because that's your profit tool.
Amazing. I think that's the key. If you don't try, you're not going to know and you're going to have that what if in your mind that honestly doesn't help at all. So now, understanding how inventory actually works. I have heard a lot about inventory methods, and I know there are a lot, and sometimes it's hard for us to say, okay, this one fits better for me. I know that FIFO and LIFO are very common inventory methods. Can you walk us through those important methods for our businesses? What impact do they have?
Yeah. So I think it really depends on if you have seasonality to your business. If you don't have seasonality, then the way that you buy or that you stock raw materials is going to look different. If you, are a retailer and you have seasonality, you might buy 6 months ahead of time. You might buy cut to order. You might buy fast fashion. So you're buying weekly. I think you have to figure out what kind of inventory you're selling and what the life cycle is in your business in particular. And then just stay really on top of it. So figure out what are your minimum inventory thresholds. So what do you always have to have on hand to make your sales goal? What are your minimum stock levels, either in raw materials or in finished goods? And then what are your sales goals? And then you can just use an open to buy system from that. So a simple open to buy formula is to take your planned sales or your sales goal, add it to how much inventory you always want to have on hand, and then subtract what you're starting with. And that's going to tell you what you need to buy for that period of time. So you could do that weekly, you could do it monthly, you could do it quarterly. Some businesses might do certain categories weekly and certain categories quarterly. So I think it's all about your business model, how your customer buys, how far ahead you have to buy supplies. If you're importing product and you can only buy twice a year because you have to buy containerfuls, we're going to look at that a little bit differently. But the sales goal is going to be important, and then what your minimum stock levels are. And then from there, you can decide what you need or should be buying.
Perfect. Yes, I think that's if you establish that in your business, I think everything is going to be more organized. You're going to have a better sense of how your inventory is going to work. And like you said, just look into everything monthly or just to have those numbers in your mind and saying, okay, I understand the method that I'm using. I understand how my inventory works. I have a minimum stock level. I have my supplies, understanding that your inventory is not your finished products. It's also your raw materials. I think all of those things are key for us to understand and say, okay, inventory actually works, right?
Yes.
And I think my last question is, what's an inventory planning? I know that probably that's something that we should do at the very beginning, but what is it involved in that situation?
Yeah, I think it would go back to that open to buy formula. So just knowing what your minimum stock levels are, knowing what your sales goals are, and then how much inventory you need to make the sales goals. A lot of times, stores won't stock enough or wholesalers won't make enough. So they have this massive sales goal, but they don't even have the inventory. Even if they sold every single thing that they have, they couldn't make that sales goal. So we have to make sure that we have the correct amount of inventory to make the goals, and then just continuing to look at it. Like you said, I think the reason that an open to buy is so good is it keeps those numbers front and center. You're always thinking, what do I have on hand? What should I have on hand? When should I reorder? How do I make sure to mark it up properly to get the maximum margin? What's not selling? How should I mark it down? And then you're not in this zone of just living like day to day. Oh my goodness, I need money, so I'm going to mark it all on sale. Or you're very methodical about what you actually need. You know what's going on in your business, and you can be proactive with your inventory instead of reactive with your inventory.
I love that. And I think that's something very important too. Instead of like trying to rescue all the things, and it's better to be aware of everything, prepare everything in advance, and probably it's not going to be that way all the time. But if you try to make it as a habit, I think it's going to be very healthy, not only for the business, but for your mental health. I think it's very helpful for us that we are doing everything from ourselves for our business. I think that's something really helpful for everyone. If you're just trying to figure out what to do, I think this episode, it's a very good one for us to have a better and clear sense of how inventory and how the healthy inventory can help our business, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So, okay, Ciara, I don't know. My last thing to ask you is just tell everyone how can they find you in social media if they want to reach out to you and work with you. Just let them know how can they find you.
Yes. So I'd love to encourage everyone to grab my book, Inventory Genius. It's a really easy read, 2-hour read, 2 or so hours. You can listen to it. There's an Audible version as well. And you can find that on my website, ciarasstockland.com. You can also follow me on Instagram at ciarasstockland.com or at The Inventory Genius.
Love that. Thank you so much. I think we had 3 amazing episodes. Everyone, there you have my conversation with Ciara. Go check out Ciara and her businesses in the link of the show notes. I hope you find this episode helpful. Don't forget to subscribe, give us a follow. And if you like this episode, please share it with your friends. Thank you for being here, and until next time.
Thank you.
And if you're interested to learn more about Inventora to help you with cost of goods sold calculation, visit Inventora.com.